Welcome everyone. So in this chapter, the first chapter, we focus on theories to understand human behavior. So these theories include applied behavior analysis. We'll mainly discuss four of them under applied behavior analysis, or ABA in short term. Under applied behavior analysis, we have behavior model, biomedical model, development model, and ecological model. Today, we're going to specifically focus on behavioral model. So through understanding behavior model, we're trying to connect, it's like a puzzle piece. We're trying to connect these pieces together to understand what causes challenging behavior. It could be the environment, it could be the medical condition or medical history of a child. Once we understand these theoretical models, we can start using these models to explain challenging behavior and apply positive behavior intervention and support in the classroom. So now you may ask, what is intervention? Intervention is the process of interfering something, right? You're interrupting something. You're preventing something from happening with counseling, with observation, with precaution, taking preparation to prevent something. In this case, specifically, preventing challenging behavior. The way we deliver intervention in the school is by using functional behavior assessment, which in short is FBA. And we're going to talk about FBA a lot. Previously, you have learned about IEP, Individualized Education Plan. However, Individualized Education Plan is quite different from functional behavior assessment. So functional behavior assessment, it is a set of questions that tries to identify the challenging behavior as well as antecedents of challenging behavior. What is causing these disruptive behavior or anxiety, anger issues in that child? We're trying to find triggers, and we're also trying to find the consequences of the behavior and analyze if the student understand that there is a consequences of their behavior or not. So functional behavior assessment, FBA, it is a systematic way to identify problem behavior. And as educator, we're trying to prevent it from reoccurring. We'll discuss more about FBA and see what the questionnaire look like and how we can identify behavior, challenging behavior specifically, and plan prevention so that it doesn't occur again and again. We are not ignoring any type of challenging behavior. We're writing it down. We're sitting down with the student and making sure we can take steps to prevent from preventing this behavior from recurring. So let's go back to the applied behavior analysis. The first thing we spoke about, applied behavior analysis, ABA. To understand ABA, applied behavior analysis, we need to look at the four main models. These are four theories. They are basically data that tells us, data principles that has experiments, that has support, evidence-based practices. Okay, so out of the four, we're going to focus on specifically the first one, which is behavior model. According to the behavior model, it should be observed and measurable. So behavior should be observed and measurable. And you might think, how do we measure behavior? What type of challenging behavior is occurring inside the classroom and repetition of it? How many times is this occurring? How many times do I have this student getting frustrated, angry, or struggling to regulate their emotion? So in the behavior model, we are not considering the student's internal issues. So you might ask, what are the internal issues? So internal issues meaning their family history, their trauma, their feelings, their ancestral history, family orientation. We're not considering any of that. The main focus is what is right now disrupting the classroom. What is the challenging behavior in the classroom? Maybe I have a student who's throwing a tantrum. We're just focused on the behavior, documenting it down, and including the antecedent. What happened before the behavior occurred, and the consequence, what happened after the student has thrown a tantrum. So we are directly focusing on behavior that can be seen, that is visible by parents, teacher, or the family members. The behavior model, it also have a purpose. It's a result of an individual's learning history, their interaction with the environment. It is a foundation. It is a foundation of applied behavior analysis. So you might ask that, well, how did we come to this conclusion, right? That whenever a behavior occurs, we don't need to consider the family history. That kind of contradicts all our learning, isn't it? Because so far we have learned that any type of behavior that occurs inside the classroom, the environment is involved, the family orientation, the practices at home, it has influences in the student. Yes, it does. The three other theories or models focuses on the parts of family history and the students' medical condition or their biomedical conditions. The behavior model, however, it only focuses on, simply put, the behavior that you can see in front of you. So in order to gain deeper understanding of the behavior model, we need to look at some of the researchers, okay? Some of the pioneers, psychologists, people that are the doctors, the expert in this area. We'll look at three of them, or actually four. So Ivan Pavlov is one of them, and then Edward Thorndike, B.F. Skinner, the very famous B.F. Skinner in our classroom. We know about him. And then another researcher, Sidney Bijou. Okay, so four researchers. We're going to take a look at their work. So first researchers, the first experiment by Ivan Pavlov. We're going to look at that. So Ivan Pavlov, he was a Russian psychologist from 1849 to 1936. So we're going way back. He's famous for his principles of respondent conditioning. Okay, now you might ask, what is this? What is respondent conditioning? So Ivan Pavlov, he did an experiment. It's a very famous experiment with a dog. Okay, he demonstrated that a dog would salivate if it is presented with a piece of meat. Okay, so then he paired this condition of the meat with a bell. So anytime he's giving the dog a piece of meat, he will at the same time also ring a bell. So he practiced it. There are lots of trials. After a ton of repeated trial, what happened is whenever Pavlov rings the bell, the dog automatically starts salivating, right? There isn't any meat, there isn't any visual, it's only sound. Because they have practiced and paired presentation of the meat and ringing a bell at the same time, whenever the dog heard the bell, it triggered memory, the memory of eating a piece of meat. And just thinking about that, the dog started salivating. So this phenomena is referred to as respondent conditioning. Our memories, our learning, a lot of it is triggered by the environment, the type of instruction we receive. I mean, this is very basic. This is, again, theory on dogs, doesn't really connect directly working with students. But again, think about it. This is from the 1849, right? 1849 to 1936. And this theory got really popular and kind of contradicting as well. And sometimes contradiction is a good thing. It raises a lot of dialogue and conversation. So this experiment gained a lot of popularity among researchers. So they started exploring the effects of consequences on behavior. So in this case, the consequence was, well, the dog gets the meat. At the same time, we ring a bell. There wasn't really any reward at the end. It's just paired up conditions together. However, researchers started thinking about consequences, the result. And from your previous module, we have, not previous, but supportive learning environment, we learned a lot about consequences, behavior consequences. So Edward Thorndike, another researcher, Edward Thorndike, in 1911, he came up with the principle of the law of effect. Okay, the law of effect. So according to Thorndike, if the behavior produces a favorable outcome on the environment, the behavior is more likely to be repeated in the future. To simplify it, if there is a positive outcome of the action, that action is going to appear over and over again, right? I finished my homework, I get a candy. Even though it's a bit challenging, I might keep going because I love this candy. So positive consequence, it's increasing positive behavior. The pioneer of this law of effect is Edward Thorndike, 1911. So he established this principle by experimenting on cats. Very interesting experiment. He trained cats to open their cage doors. How funny is that? So cats would open their cage door, but do you think a cat inside a cage will just willingly try to open a cage? No, not really. It needs some motivation. Why do I need to open my cage door, right? So the setting was the cat was inside the cage. However, outside there was food. The food was liver. Cats, they love organ meat. So liver was there. Organ meat was presented outside of the cage, and the smell of the food, the organ liver, really stimulated the cat, and the cat now wants to get out of the cage. So Edward Thorndike, he trained cats to open their cage doors by presenting them with food. Getting the food is a positive learning outcome for the cat. So at the end, the cat not only it repeated the process independently, with time and practice, they did it faster, right? So this is quite interesting. Next we have B.F. Skinner, who thought, we have this condition that there is a stimulation present. We are teaching a cat to learn, and the consequence is positive. Then B.F. Skinner, he came up with the term operant conditioning. Okay, so that's a continuation of Edward Thorndike's research. That research evolved later on, became the principle of operant conditioning. So operant conditioning, it's a behavior that is to a considerable degree controlled by their consequences. So B.F. Skinner, he's saying that positive consequences, it's going to increase a behavior to occur over and over again. However, negative consequences, it's going to decrease the behavior from appearing. Now, B.F. Skinner, he also did his experiment on animals, specifically on rats. Then another researcher came in and said, you know what, it's not enough. Ivan Pavlov, Edward Thorndike, B.F. Skinner, all of these guys, they're brilliant, but then all of their research and behavioral theories are based off of experimenting on animal behavior, which, in some degree connects to human behaviors. However, what about the application? What about the application of these behavior theories in children? So, based on this curiosity, researcher Sidney Bijou in 1963, he explored the application of Skinner's operant conditioning theory. And he specifically focused on students with intellectual disability. So Bijou, they said that, you know what, all of these theories, these principles, they are measurable. That's a good thing. We can measure it. We can definitely agree that positive consequences is increasing the behavior. However, negative consequences, it's decreasing it. But when we work with children, Bijou advocated that we need to use functional analysis. We need to have evidence-based practices that influences learning so that we can understand the triggers, the positive outcome, and what initiates learning in children with intellectual disabilities. For a long time, not a lot of research was done, or accommodation or modification were done for students with exceptionality or students with special needs. So keep in mind that it's a very long time ago. We're just at the initial stages. We have all these behavioral theories that we're trying to understand, analyze, and also establish an evidence-based practice in education, which is tough, right? That's when Sidney Bijou, they wanted educators to involve in their instructor a systematic instruction. And that systematic instruction, we now know it as individualized education plan. They also said that, individualized education plan is not enough. We also need to include parents, educators, the specialists, whatever support they're receiving from a medical professional. So Bijou wanted the ABA to be used in the field of education to take a scientific approach and focus on observable and measurable data, okay, as well as understand the relationship between the student with the special need as well as their environment. Also, considering the history, the instructional or learning history of that student, focusing on the student's strength as well as understanding the stimulation that encourages the student's learning and the reinforcements that works with the student that are observable and measurable, and you can repeat these reinforcements as well. So Sidney Bijou, their main focus was measure and evidence-based practices. It's very much of a calculated approach in learning. So for a very long time, this approach was not really appreciated or accepted in academia for being too clinical, for being too prescribed or mathematical. But now, if we look at the practices and the education setting or instructional plan right now, it's changing. It's very much becoming evidence-based practices in education. It's gaining recognition and in the treatment of autism as well as supporting providing specific support with students with special needs.